Hello there, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. I'm going to be doing my own self-imposed challenge run on a game called Moonlighter. Moonlighter is a roguelike dungeon crawler with a bit of a twist, because not only are you crawling through dungeons, but you're also a merchant and shopkeeper. So we toil our days and nights away in the dungeon, looking for treasures and goods to sell to the townspeople. With the money we collect from selling our treasures to the townspeople, we can upgrade our gear, equipment, and shop, all while trying to uncover the mystery of the 5th dungeon. So I'm gonna spend 100 days surviving in Moonlighter. Let's see how far we can get through the dungeons, and see what kind of treasures we can find in order to sell to the townspeople to upgrade our shop as much as possible. Of course, all while trying to uncover the mysteries behind the game. And basically just get rich. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and with that, let's get into Moonlighter. We begin our story in a land as old as imagination, so around about 3,000 years or so I guess. Randomly one night, mazes full of extraordinary treasures and deadly creatures just appeared out of nowhere. And the people of the town referred to these mazes as dungeons. The village that took root by these dungeons is known as Renoka, and among the settlers of the village, 2 groups seemed to shine the brightest: heroes and merchants, cause they were rich motherfuckers, and money is power. But not long after the beginning of the capitalist regime, the dungeons were closed as they proved too dangerous and claimed too many lives. Life was beginning to get hard for the young merchant named Will, the owner of the oldest shop in the village, aptly named the Moonlighter. And Will has long dreamed of opening the mysterious 5th door of the dungeons. And Will is an American, and they will not impede on his freedoms. And with that, we set off to the dungeons and begin our first day. We start our first day already in the dungeon with some kind of weird hieroglyphs on the wall telling me how to play the game. As I learn how to move, I find out Will is like me in real life and can't move diagonally. I then learn how to roll, and unlike me in real life, Will has iframes, which is pretty handy. Continuing through the dungeon, we do some sweet flips over some big gaps. We use our newly discovered iframes to roll our way through some laser shooting dogs. We then find ourselves trapped in a room with some angry slimes and have to learn the importance of combat. Only equipped with a broom, I bash the slimes and continue onwards. I learn how to use a power attack by holding square. I then find some chests, obtaining my first mysterious treasures, which is some fabric and foundry rests, whatever they're supposed to be. Entering a room, I get overwhelmed by an amalgamation of different enemies. Will fights as hard as he can, but he can't overcome the onslaught, and just finally gives up and sorta dies. We find ourselves unconscious outside of the dungeon, where we are rescued by a mysterious old man and taken home. We start our second day with the old man named Xenon talking to us about the dungeons. He says we have the same intrigue about the 5th dungeon as a man named Pete, who is no longer around and was the previous owner of the Moonlighter. He implores us to forget about the 5th dungeon because he thinks we'll meet the same fate as Pete and just kinda die somewhere. We quickly tell him not to impede on our freedom and to get the fuck out of our shop. But before he leaves, he wants to give us a lesson in economics. He says in order to run a successful shop, we must know an item's value and demand. So we open our shop to customers for the first time so we can learn how to make some money. After selling a rock to a crystal mummy, we get a smiley reaction. We're told this is the best reaction we can hope for because it means the item was not too expensive but not too cheap that we lose profit. We get a sad reaction from the man looking at the rock for sale for $170, which means it's too expensive, so the man leaves without buying it. He then warns us not to sell popular items too much, otherwise we'll flood the market, meaning we'll have to sell them for a cheaper price. We're told to charge more money when something is in high demand yet low supply. We have a notebook that tracks the reactions of customers buying our items, so we can use this notebook as a reference in order to know how much to sell items for in the future. With all that out of the way, it's now night time on day 2, so we head straight back into the dungeon. Xenon also gave us a sword and shield, so we don't have to use our broom anymore. We fight our way through our first room of enemies, taking some damage but picking up some items along the way. I bash my way through rooms of golems and rooms of slimes, trying to make my way through this maze. We eventually enter a room and find a map that shows us we have to clear 4 dungeons in order to open the 5th dungeon. We then find a pendant that allows us to pay 200 gold in order to get back to the shop, and this is our only way of escaping the dungeon from here on out. That or death, but if we die we lose all our treasures. So we teleport back. We find Xenon and he congratulates us on learning how to use the pendant. He asks us about the map we found, saying that it belonged to old Pete, and stating that we found his body. So that solves the mystery of Pete. Xenon then tells us to stop pursuing the 5th dungeon, and tells us to just stay in the Golem dungeon in order to sell the artifacts we find. He then points us towards the town board where we can spend money in order to fix the village, and it's also the place where we buy upgrades for our shop. We look at the board and we decide we want the forge to upgrade our gear and the shop in order to buy items, like potions and stuff. We then set up the items we want to sell in our shop for tomorrow. Not knowing what anything is worth, but I did overprice iron by about 10 times. We then go to bed and begin day 3. This is where things will start to flow more naturally and days will go more quickly as we've learned about the bulk of the game. I start day 3 by opening my shop and trying to figure out the price of iron. I settle on $30 for the price of iron. People are still upset by it, but they're buying it anyway, so yeah, good. Everything I try to sell on my first day of having my shop open is way too expensive, but I eventually figure out the prices and people end up buying everything. I then close the shop and finish my first day. I had 20 customers and I made 1,355 gold. In a silly move, instead of going to the dungeon at night, I went to bed instead, starting day 4. At the beginning of day 4, I buy Vulcan's forge, so now I can buy and upgrade equipment. He sells armor, swords and shields, big swords, spears, gloves, and bows. However, you also need materials in order to make the gear. So sometimes you have to sacrifice what you would sell in the shop in order to better your gear to get further in the dungeons. I decide I want the spear and the bow, so I add them to my wish list so I know what items I need in order to make them. I then buy the wooden hat, which is the item shop. Here you can make or buy potions in order to take into the dungeon. You can also upgrade your weapons here using energizing crystals that you'll find. I check out the shop real quick and then I head off back into the dungeon. And of course the first enemy I encounter is a unique enemy called a mimic. It's a lot tougher than normal enemies you'll find in this area, but I also just did a really bad job of fighting it and died. I go straight back into the dungeon again during night time on day 4 and don't encounter a mimic straight away. I find some chests with some treasures and artifacts in them. Some artifacts that you find in chests in this game have to be placed in a specific spot in your bag or do a specific thing like destroy an item in another spot. Which means sometimes you just have to screw around with your inventory management a bit. We continue our way through the dungeon, finding new types of enemies to kill and new types of rewards to pick up. After making my way through 7 different rooms, I encounter this floor's boss. I try to fight him, but he proves a bit too strong, so I use the pendant to teleport away. After I teleport back to the town, day 5 has already begun because I was in the dungeon during the night. I put all the items away I got on day 4 and head back into the dungeon during the day. During this dungeon run, I tend to have a bit of trouble with the golem enemies. My sword is so short, every time I try to swing at them, I miss and I get hit by them. One of the reasons I want the spear, it's because I think the length will really benefit me. Regardless, I managed to kill the golem enemies and press on. I find a pool, and when you sit in it, it restores your health, and when you find these pools, it means that the floor boss is in the next room. I don't think I'm ready to fight the boss yet, so I head in a different direction to find more enemies and different treasures. I find a hidden artifact in a chest, and you don't know what these artifacts are until you get back to the town. I continue on for a while, going through multiple different rooms and killing lots of enemies and finding a few chests. I then use the pendant to go back to town, and on this run I managed to kill 17 enemies and find 2 chests. I then head back to the village and check out Vulcan's forge. I still don't have the items I need for either the spear or the bow, so I head back home. I place some items for sale for when I open the shop tomorrow, but I have a lot of new stuff that I don't know how to price, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I place down some fabric, some steel, some runes and a water lamp, and I don't really know the value of anything but the runes and the fabric. I go to bed and then I open the shop at the start of day 6. A nice old lady is my first customer and she buys all my fabric for $1,250. However, another customer is apparently very angry about my water lamp costing 1,000 gold. So I drop its price to $200 to see how people feel about it now. I sell 3 pieces of steel for $600 and this reaction gets gold in the customer's eyes, which means I sold it way too cheap. And then the exact same thing happens with my water lamp that I sold for $200. So both the steel and the water lamp are worth more than $200 a pop. I then sell the rest of my stuff and close up the shop. I had 18 customers today and made $5,700, so that's the most money I've made so far. I go to bed again, still not realizing I'm meant to go to the dungeon at night. I accidentally open the shop when I try to leave, so I waste the entire day and close the shop again. I go to the wooden hat and I craft some potions. I then go to the town board in order to upgrade my shop, and I buy a bed that gives me more health whenever I sleep in it. It's kind of like having a permanent health upgrade. I then go off into the dungeon for the night. I instantly encounter 2 golems and I get my head bashed in for a bit and then die again. I begin the start of day 8 inside the dungeon for another chance to get some more treasures. I equip health potions and I figure out how to use them this time, so if I'm in the same spot I shouldn't die again. I make my way through the dungeon, finding a golem and killing him this time, getting some revenge. I find a treasure chest and I take the artifacts. In the next room I get mobbed by some slimes and take a fair bit of damage, but continue on anyway. I continue my way through various rooms, bashing lots of enemies and finding more chests. I eventually end up in a room with an enemy that knocks my items out of my pockets, so I opt to use my pendant to get back to the town. Mostly because my sword just seemed too short to be able to kill the enemy at this time. When I get back to town, I go to bed and then I start day 9. On the beginning of day 9, I go to Vulcan's forge and I finally create the training spear that I've wanted for a while. I then go back to my shop and set up my items to sell for the day, and then I open the shop. I had a quick day, only having 10 visitors and making $1,400. After closing the shop for the day, I go and pick up some more potions and then I head back to the dungeon. In the dungeon, I get to try out my new spear, which seems to be far more effective than the sword, and I can keep the golems at bay and kill them easily. It still takes a bit to learn, however, because it's a straightforward attack, whereas the sword had an arcing motion and can hit multiple enemies in that way, whereas the spear hits multiple enemies if they're in a straight line. I continue to make my way through the dungeon, killing more and more enemies with my spear. However, I've noticed if you kill an enemy near an edge, the items will fall off into the abyss and you won't be able to get them. So I gotta be careful about that. I continue my way through the dungeon, and I finally make it to the floor boss, and equipped with potions and my spear, I decide to fight him this time. It's a pretty quick battle of attrition, and I end up killing him fairly easily. After I kill him, I decide to go search some other rooms instead of going down to the next floor, and then I use my pendant to warp out. On this dungeon run, I killed 14 enemies, got 2 chests and killed the floor boss. I go back to my shop and I store the items on my wish list for my bow and armor. I then open up my shop ready to sell some items on day 10. I have a nice day in my shop selling my items to happy customers. I have a fair few items to sell today and have lots of customers coming through and I'm making a fair amount of money. I sell all the items I have, finish up for the day and close my shop. Today I had 14 customers and made $3,700. And of course now it's time to head back into the dungeon. This time when I enter the dungeon, I instantly encounter more goo monsters. And the same type of enemy that takes away my items whenever it hits me. I kill all the goo monsters and decide to take on the enemy that drops all my items now I have my spear, and I figure out that I have to dodge his attack and then attack him when he's down. I beat him pretty easily and I get a chest as a reward and find some nice artifacts inside. I press forwards into a trippy looking forest room, not thinking much of it, so I kill the enemies in there, get some cool new items and continue onwards. I continue my way through the dungeon and go through a bunch of different rooms and kill a ton of different enemies and end up before the floor boss again. After I kill the floor boss, I head back to town as my bag is full and I can't pick up any more items. I start day 11 by placing my items down and opening up my shop. I seem to have a pretty good idea of what every item is worth now, and running my shop is pretty smooth sailing from here on out and I seem to be making a lot more money. I sell some of my energizing crystals because I haven't thought to upgrade any of my gear yet. I have a pretty successful day selling items. I had 16 customers come through and made $4,400. Seeing as I have $8,000 at the moment, I decide to use my money in order to expand my shop. Now I have twice the room to sell items and I can place ornaments and other things around the shop to increase the amount of money I get from tips and different stuff like that. Happy with my new store, I go and pick up some potions before heading out to the dungeon. I seem to be having an easier time in combat and I'm getting a lot better with my spear. In the dungeon, I find another forest room and just decide to kill whatever's in there and continue onwards like normal. I continue bashing lots of different monsters with my spear and opening lots of cool treasure chests. As I make my way through the dungeon, I make it to the floor boss again and I defeat him. I pick up everything I can and my bags are full, and as I can't drop items at the moment, I use my pendant and then go back to town. Back at town, now I've upgraded my shop, I see I have a pen full of eggs. These will eventually hatch into little monster helpers that you can take into the dungeon. Continuing on with the start of day 12, I go and talk to the blacksmith Vulcan. I see I have the items to craft some armor, but not the money, so I'll have to open my shop. So I place down all my items that I want to sell and I open my new improved store for the first time. However, today something different happens and a thief enters my store. I manage to stop him and bash him before he can steal my stuff, but that's something I have to be on the lookout for now. I'm selling some new items today, so people are getting a bit mad at me because I don't know how to price them, but other than that it's been a pretty good day of sales. I closed my shop up for the day. I had 16 customers, 1 thief, and I made $5,400. I then go to Vulcan and I can finally craft an iron chest piece, which gives me 40 extra vitality. I then go over to the wooden hat and I enchant my spear, taking it from 20 damage to 34 damage. I go back home and I store all my useless items, and then I head out to the dungeon again. I have my new and improved gear, and it makes the first level of the dungeon a lot easier. However, there does seem to be some stronger enemies around now. I make my way through the dungeon, not having too much trouble at all, and collecting lots of items and different gear. I'm making light work of all the enemies that I find, and I have a ton of health potions, so I'm not really threatened by death. At least not on this floor. I continue my way through the dungeon, finding a lot of chests and killing a lot of enemies. There seems to be a lot more rooms around at the moment. I make my way to the floor boss, the Golem warrior, and I kill him again, except this time I actually go to the second level of the dungeon. I wish I just came to the second floor a lot sooner, because I find an item called the mirror, where you can sell items from your inventory for gold, effectively being the same as being able to drop items, which I just couldn't do before. I check out a room on the second floor and get bashed by a rolling block, and then, I decide to just teleport back to the shop for now. On day 13, I place out all my items ready for sale, and then I go to the back and I store all my key items that I want to use to be able to make gear. I'm having a good day of sale, selling lots of items, and then another thief comes past, but I bash this one as well and get my items back again. I sell everything I have to sell and I close my shop for the day. I had 16 customers and I made 6,300 gold. Oh yeah, and 1 thief. I go and check out the town board and I see that there are new people I can invest in to bring new stores to the town, but I don't do any of that just yet. I have enough materials to get some armor, so I go to Vulcan and I craft an iron helm, and then I go to the wooden hat and I enchant my spear again to do more damage. And with even more new and improved gear, we head off to the dungeon for the night. The first room I go to in the dungeon is the pool room right before the floor boss, so I decide to explore some other rooms first before fighting him. I come across a room with a lot of gaps, so I've got to do a lot of sweet flips to get to where I want to go. In the next room, I kill some slimes and grab a chest. I go through and explore every room of the first floor before going to the boss. I kill the boss, then head back to the pool room before going to the second floor. On the second floor, I come past a room with a tent and a book in it. I've found and read a few of these books, but they just say a few things like the dungeon is a maze and changes every time you come in, or the enemies are like moths to a flame. Nothing really lore ridden so far. On the second floor, I do encounter some more difficult enemies, like the bowling ball you have to smash into an object to be able to do damage to, or the golem that shoots stuff and you have to hit it in the back to do damage. I explore a few different rooms, killing a bunch of enemies and getting more chests until my bags are full, and then I head back to town. At the beginning of day 14, I look in my pen and see that my eggs have hatched. So I take the little slime buddy with me because he can apparently stun enemies, and that sounds pretty useful. I then go and place some items down ready to sell, and then I open my shop for the day. I only had 12 customers but had a lot of expensive items for sale, so I ended up making 6,100 gold for the day. I then go visit Eris at the wooden hat to go and craft some potions before I go out to the dungeon. It's a pretty standard affair. On the first floor, I kill all the enemies around and pick up a bunch of items. My little monster helper does stun enemies, and I'm also happy to see that he stuns the boss, making the floor boss really easy to kill this time around. Not that he wasn't easy before anyway. My bags fill up before I reach the second floor, and so I decide to leave. I killed 30 enemies and got 3 chests in the dungeon this time around though. On the beginning of day 15, I go and visit Vulcan's forge, but I don't create anything because I want to save up to be able to get the bow. I then go home and place down some items and open up my shop. A lot of the stuff I've been finding seems to be a lot more valuable, and I seem to consistently be making a bit more money than usual at this point. I sell some broken swords, crystals, golem cores, and a bunch of other stuff. Fabric. I sold everything and then closed my store, and today I had 15 customers and made 6,400 gold. Now it's time to head straight back into the dungeon for the night. I go through the first floor of the dungeon pretty quickly, kill the floor boss and head off to the second floor. I have the little jug golem monster with me this time, and he shoots water at enemies, but I don't think he's as useful as my little slime monster that stuns them. I bash my way through the floor of the second dungeon, finding lots of good items and rare artifacts. I find another forest room on the second floor of the dungeon, and the forest rooms are just a little taste of what the next dungeon's gonna be like. The forest dungeon. After I clear the forest room, I head back to town and I start day 16. I go to Vulcan's Forge and I build the training bow now that I have the materials. I then go home and I place all my key items in storage before placing out some items for sale and then opening my shop like usual. I have lots of expensive things on sale today and I'm hoping to make a fair amount of money. Today I had another thief come in, but I managed to bash him for the third time in a row. Fuck those thieves, I'll impede on their freedoms. Other than that, I had 18 customers and made 6,300 gold, so yeah, pretty good. I go and see Eris at the wooden hat and I enchant my helmet and my chest plate, giving me more defense in total. And before, when I said I have the training bow, I meant to say I have the upgraded version. I have the hunter's bow. I also craft some potions while at the wooden hat, and then I head off to the dungeon. I smash straight through the first floor, killing lots of enemies, and then going straight to the floor boss and killing him, and then heading off to the second floor. I've been trying out the hunter's bow in this dungeon run as well, and it's okay, but it's mainly useful for just a few niche situations. The way enemies are designed in this game just don't lend themselves to being killed by the bow very easily, which I guess is a good thing because otherwise it might trivialize yeah, good, the entire game. I bash lots of rolling boulders and other enemies, finding some pretty cool stuff on the second floor. I do a bit of inventory management before leaving the dungeon so I can get the best items possible, and then I teleport away. I get back to town starting day 18. I instantly go to my shop and I put my items down for sale and then I open the store. I have 8,000 gold at the moment and I've been hoarding a lot of steel that I've decided to sell off, so I'm hoping to make a fair amount of money today and have a fair amount of money saved. I'm also selling more beautiful random shit like water lamps and broken swords and golem cores. I had 19 customers come in today and my fourth thief that I managed to bash again, and I made over 10 grand. I go over to Vulcan's Forge and then I favourite the warrior spear because that's the next upgrade that I want to get. I go to the dungeon and I start using my bow, just having a bit of fun. The only downside to my little goo buddy is the fact that he looks exactly the same as other monsters and sometimes it's hard to tell what I have to bash. I go and kill the boss and then I make my way down to the second floor. I'm trying to use my bow a little more in this run and just get a bit better with it. I make my way to the boss on the second floor and I decide to fight him. He's definitely tougher than the boss on the first floor, which, you know, I should expect, but to my surprise, my little helper was able to stun him multiple times, and yeah, that really helped out. I make my way to the bottom floor of the dungeon for the first time. I find an item that allows me to teleport out yet saves my position in the dungeon. It costs a lot more gold to use, but it'll be really useful when I'm on level 3. I decide to fight a couple enemies in a couple rooms on floor 3 and find a chest, and then I teleport back to the town. After I killed the second floor boss, I got a rune tool, which is the item I needed to upgrade my spear. So at the beginning of day 19 I visit Vulcan's Forge and I upgrade my training spear to a warrior spear. I then go over to Eris at the wooden hat to look at upgrading it and see that it costs 16,000 gold, which is a bit steep at the moment. I put a lot of items that I stored in my inventory for sale to get rid of them now that I know that I don't need them anymore. I open my shop for just a quick day of selling. Today I only had 12 customers and made 3,100 gold, but got rid of some useless stuff. I head off to the dungeon and I make quick work of the rooms with my new warrior spear. I kill the first floor boss and I only make it to the second floor this time before my inventory is filled with some pretty valuable stuff. So I teleport back to the town and then I go home and store some stuff in my inventory and then go back out and place some items out to sell for the day. I open my shop and run the store for a while on day 20. It was a good day of selling stuff because I had a lot of valuable items. 20 customers came through and another thief came today and I bashed him as well, so that's 5 thieves that I've gotten in a row. Honestly, I don't bash every thief. Some of them just seem to leave if you walk around them for long enough, which is actually pretty realistic. I also made 10,000 gold, which is pretty good. I have 25,000 gold saved up, so I try to go to the town centre and get the merchant hawker, but I can't get him during the night, so instead I just go to the dungeon for now. It's a pretty standard affair in the first floor of the dungeon for the most part, until I fall down a hole. I activate some kind of portal and I have to kill a few waves of enemies that are pretty easy, but then I get a chest as a reward and can climb back up. I have a pretty fun easy time on the first floor of the dungeon and I kill the floor boss, but then I walk back to town because my inventory is filled with some pretty good stuff. I then spend 20,000 gold to get the merchant hawker. Hawker sells decorations for your shop that can give various different bonuses, like being able to have more villagers in your shop at one time, or making the villagers move faster in your shop so they buy more stuff more quickly. Then there are my favourite decorations that give you a 10% tip whenever customers buy anything. I buy the fruit bowl that's meant to give me 10% extra tips. However, the only place I can place it in my shop replaces an item that does the exact same thing and also gives me 10% tips, so I can't use the fruit bowl at the moment until I upgrade my shop. I place down a lot of items for sale and then I open my shop for day 21. I've got a lot of good stuff to sell and I'm also still selling all the stuff from my inventory that I no longer need. Today is a pretty good day of sales with 18 customers and making 9,000 gold. I store some items in my inventory and then begin my night in the dungeon. I'm still having a really easy time on the first couple floors with all my new upgraded gear. I've got my warrior spear, warrior bow, and a full set of upgraded iron armor, so iron helmet, iron chestplate, and iron boots. Combat does seem to be a bit more genuinely fun now that I'm a bit stronger. I go through the first floor pretty easily and then kill the floor boss in about 3 seconds, but my inventory's full so I walk back to town starting day 22. I just go straight home and put items up for sale and then I open my store. I sold a lot more of the items I had stored in my boxes at the back of the shop, and it was a pretty good day of sales. I had 21 customers and 1 thief, but made 9,000 gold. I go back home and put some stuff in storage and I get some energizing crystals out and I go to Eris at the wooden hat. I spend 16,000 gold and I upgrade my warrior spear, taking it from 50 damage to 74 damage. I then go back home and put some items in storage again and then head off to the dungeon. I 1 or 2 hit most enemies in the dungeon with my warrior spear now. I have a pretty easy time on the first floor and I kill the floor boss and then head off to the second floor of the dungeon. I kill some enemies on the second floor and then I use my mirror to sell some of my less valuable items while I'm in the dungeon to make room for more valuable stuff. I then walk back to the town seeing as my inventory is full and I start day 23. I place down lots of valuable items in my shop and I'm hoping to make a lot of money today and I open the store. I spend the entire day with my shop open and I sell a lot of stuff, having 31 customers and 1 thief. I make 16,000 gold today, making it my most valuable day by far. I go back to the dungeon and work through the night bashing monsters. I kill the floor boss in 4 hits and I continue on to the second floor. This time on my dungeon run, I'm finding lots of valuable items that are used to upgrade equipment or are just worth a lot of money in general. I spend a fair amount of time doing some inventory management, making sure I get the best stuff possible. After I'm happy with my inventory, I walk back to town and I start day 24. I go to Vulcan's Forge and I just have a bit of a browse at the moment. I can't really get any of the gear I want. I go back to my store and I place down lots of valuable items for sale. I pretty much know the value of everything from the Golem dungeon at the moment. I have another very long day of sales with 25 customers and 1 thief, but I made 13,000 gold. I forgot to mention that I bought the king's bed the other night for 20,000 gold, so it was pretty expensive, but now I have 100 extra health. I go around bashing monsters on the first floor for a while before going to the floor boss and just heading off to the second floor. I find a lot of good stuff on the second floor and my inventory's full, but I use the mirror to sell some less valuable items to make room for the better stuff, and then I continue on to the second floor boss. With all my armor, health potions and warrior spear, I make light work of the second floor boss. I go down to the third floor, but instead of using the pendant to get back, I make a portal so I can get back to the third floor straight away next time I want to go to the dungeon. I then go home and I set up my items for sale and I open my store on day 25. I have a fair few nice items for sale today and a thief hanging around my store, so he's a bit annoying, but yeah, he just kind of walked off after I bloody trailed him for a bit. But it was another really good day of sales with 28 customers, that 1 thief, but I made 17,000 gold, breaking my record again. I go to Eris and I upgrade my warrior spear again, taking it to 98 damage. I then take the portal I set up straight down to the third floor of the dungeon. With my upgraded warrior spear, I seem to kill every enemy on the third floor in 2 or 3 hits. I go through a lot of rooms, killing a lot of enemies on the third floor and getting lots of rare items. I'm finding lots of items like Golem schematics, and I have no idea what to do with them at the moment, but hopefully they lead to something cool. I then enter a room with 20 slimes and I've got to bash them all down. I continue through the third floor and I get to the pool room right before the boss. I'm on full health, so I decide to just go for it and fight the final boss in this dungeon. I enter the room and the boss fight triggers, a small cutscene plays and the Golem King reanimates and I have to fight him. The Golem King is a lot stronger than any of the other bosses we've fought so far, but I do seem to be making pretty quick work of him with my warrior spear. I take a bit of damage, but I have a lot of potions to heal up. However, without realizing it, I stupidly switch to my warrior bow and I keep attacking him with it, doing a lot less damage for a bit of time. I fight with my bow for way too long without realizing my mistake. And just do way less damage for ages, but then eventually realise and switch back to my warrior spear. I finish off the Golem King with my warrior spear and I get given some kind of key, and then a chest unlocks at the back of the room. In the chest there's a bunch of different Golem schematics and Golem lore books, and a lot of the items don't stack with each other, so I have to do some inventory management to be able to take this stuff back. I get everything from the chest, and then a portal opens in the room. It teleports me outside of the 5th dungeon and puts the key I obtained into the door. It's one of 4 keys I need to obtain to be able to open it. I head back to town and Xenon talks to me about defeating the Golem King. He tells me to stop, otherwise we'll meet the same fate as Pete, but at this point I'm just sick of hearing that. He says because of me the town has decided to reopen the forest dungeon, so now I've got a whole new dungeon to explore and a bunch of new items to find. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I'm currently working on part 2 at the moment. I'm having a lot of fun playing Moonlighter and I had a lot of fun making this video, so I really hope you guys enjoyed watching it. Part 2 will be up in a couple days and we'll see what the forest dungeon has for us. So I hope you all have a wonderful time until then. And again, thank you so much for watching.